Welcome to Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Tracy Stein. As some of you may know, I am a psychologist and I'm an educator. I've created a whole series of very empowering audio programs that have been out there for a long time on everything from meditation to healthy self-esteem and achieving a healthy body weight and developing your intuition and getting a good night's sleep. So the reason I started this podcast is because I've really spent my career, at least 20 years, trying to do things that help people live a better life and so that they could achieve a happier, healthier version of themselves. And, I'm sharing my wisdom and my experience as a psychologist, but also as somebody who's not only studied a lot and seen a lot of clients, but as someone who's always been doing my own work on myself. And so you learn a lot by doing that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is this whole idea of myths about stress management. And the reason I bring this up is because people who know me or get to know me after they've seen my work will be shocked to hear that I might also get stressed out about something. And I always laugh because I'm thinking, I'm a human being. We're actually built to have a response to perceived threats, right? So whether it's in primitive times when we might have been being chased by some wild animal, prehistoric animal, or whether it's now where we have a meeting coming up on a Monday and it's Sunday and we're worried about how our presentation will go, or whether our boss will be in a good mood, or we have a first date coming up and we are worried about whether it's going to go well because maybe we really want to find that right person. Or maybe we're someone who has an anxiety issue, a clinically significant anxiety issue, or just has specific things that trigger anxiety, like anything from public speaking to, exercising in public and so forth. So the thing is that obviously there's a big difference between a threat that is life-threatening, like being chased by, a bear, depending on where you live, or, being in an accident or something like that. Those things are incredibly stressful, and they're completely different things, but they're both life-threatening. But a lot of the things that cause us the most stress aren't actually those things. They're things like the movies in our minds that play over and over again, even about things that have already happened. And I'm sure probably everybody listening has met someone, and maybe more than one person, who will rehash past hurts or past personal failures. And even if it's years and years later, they can still get really worked up about how somebody wronged them or how they made a mistake and so forth. And the problem with that is, it's good for us to learn from the things that don't go well. Either, say somebody wronged us, maybe that teaches us something about how careful we want to be going forward about, who we choose to let into our lives. Or how we might pick up on signals or signs that something's not quite right. And that can even be, again, at a job. It doesn't even have to be that someone hurt you in a deeply emotional way, but we learn more about what suits us and what serves us and what doesn't, and we get to make more well-informed choices based on our experiences. That's a good thing. So understanding and reflecting on past experiences is really important. But the challenge with that is that, again, there are people who maybe have been divorced for 25 years. I'm not making this up. And are still dwelling on, some awful thing that their spouse said or did. And the problem is our bodies respond as if the threat is happening in the now, as if it's almost as real as something that's actually happening to us. And the problem is, as you may already know, when we're stressed, our bodies are flooded with stress hormones. It takes a toll on our health. It weakens our immunity. It can increase inflammation, which leads to a whole host of other problems. So there are people who will go on and on about the things that they messed up on. And that actually is not productive. Sometimes people obsess about the things that they did wrong because they've been conditioned to do that, or it almost feels like there's some virtue in really beating yourself up. But it's not helpful. So it's important to own what we do. It's important to learn from the situations that we wouldn't want to repeat if we have a choice, and sometimes we don't. But it's completely unhelpful to swim in those waters because it leaves us feeling like we're drowning. So what can we do? I think we have to all take a look at our own patterns and see in a given day, what are the things that give us joy, and what are the things that make us proud of ourselves, and what are the things that cause us to feel stressed or helpless and so forth. And really re-examine the kind of chain of events that tends to lead to these things. And again, we don't have control, of course. We don't have control over everything that happens to us. And we live in a really complicated world that is loaded with opportunity for stress. But the things that we can change and the decisions that we can change are ones we should really take a look at and ask ourselves, if I did X, Y, Z differently, how would that have changed this outcome or the way I have felt about this experience? Another thing is meditation. Now, you'll hear me talk about meditation, and it doesn't mean you have to be meditating for 2 hours a day. Some people do, and that might be you, and it might not. But meditation is something I've had people say, well, I can't meditate because in the moment when I'm super stressed, that feels impossible. And when I ask people about that, invariably it's that they don't meditate at any other time. The time to be really benefiting from meditation is when you do it all the time, every day, as a regular practice, or most of the time, including the informal meditation, like just being present for what you're doing, like the classic example of when you're washing the dishes, wash the dishes. When you're mowing the lawn, be present, mow the lawn. When you're with your children, really be present and bring your awareness back to that moment. That's just like training yourself to do anything else more naturally and easily. And when you do that, what happens is it makes you much more resilient in general. It makes you more stress hardy, so that when something happens later on, something unexpected comes up, you're going to have some sort of reaction because you're a human being and we react to stressful events, and that's normal and appropriate. But you don't have to have the same intensity of reaction. The other thing is that meditation helps us engage this part of our minds, these areas in the frontal lobe that help us to be objective and to plan, to think about our thinking, to think about what the consequences might be of responding one way or another. And it enables us to hold in mind both the understanding and awareness and feeling that we're stressed, but also see that there's more to our inner landscape and our outer landscape than any one thing at any given moment. And that can actually be life-saving, because if you're chronically stressed and chronically reactive, your chances of developing some sort of illness over time actually go up. So meditation is a tool that's kind of like physical exercise, right? You wouldn't sign up for a race and only start running that day. I mean, you might, but most people would find that race is a lot harder and they might not finish, or they might injure themselves. But if you're training even little bits over time, again, you develop that muscle to become more resilient in the face of stress. And to be honest, you're more present for the rest of your life. I'm going to tell you an interesting story. So many years ago, I was probably in my mid-20s, maybe late 20s, and I was making a point of doing brief yoga in the morning, just very gentle, maybe 15 minutes of yoga tops. Because I'm somebody who doesn't like to do an hour of yoga. I'm admitting that. I like shorter kind of intervals of exercise or meditation and so forth. And I was probably doing about maybe 15 minutes of meditation. Sometimes at night I might do a half hour or even 40 minutes if I had time where I wasn't interrupted. But I would notice sometimes it was easier, sometimes it wasn't. And I noticed a few things. One, I definitely became more resilient in the face of life stressors because, I'm a naturally easily stressed out person. That's probably part of what drew me to this field. I come from a long line of people who get stressed pretty easily. And so it's something that I had to work at. And I can tell you that the difference is profound. The other thing I notice is that, some of you are familiar that, with my intuitive work and the fact that I've developed audio programs and a course on intuition or 2 courses. It's something very real. There's plenty of data out there saying that intuition is absolutely real and trainable. I'm not trying to push it on anybody who's not open to that. But, most people have had some sort of intuitive experience, even if they wouldn't call it that. When you meditate, your intuitive muscle gets that much stronger, and you become better able to recognize your own inner wisdom and your own intuitive guidance. And you also, I just think it helps in every area of our lives, right? We get a sense of when something feels right for us or doesn't. We get a sense of whether maybe we should take a different route to work that day, even though it doesn't make logical sense. And maybe we hear later on that we've avoided a huge traffic jam or an accident, and so forth. So, but I also had more, what I would say, transpersonal experiences that absolutely made me not only know in an intellectual way, but feel how connected we all are, and how there is a greater purpose to our lives than all of the mundane stuff that we schedule every day. And it's something, again, that I believed anyway, but I felt it very deeply. And I remember having, been walking home from work one day, walking a few blocks, and all of a sudden having this moment of sheer bliss and sense of connectedness. And it's something I really can't put into words well, but this feeling of peace and grace and gratitude and connectedness with all things. And years later, I still remember that experience, many years later, a lifetime later. And so meditation has many, many benefits. Is it good to try and meditate or breathe through stressful experiences while they're happening? Absolutely. But that really works much better if you have been strengthening that muscle all along. And the other thing is about cognitive flexibility. So can meditation foster cognitive flexibility? Absolutely. Being resilient in the face of stress is certainly a sign of good emotional well-being, but so is something called cognitive flexibility. And what that means is the ability to take a look at what you know or take as something you know and what you think and how you do things, and to be able to step back and see the larger picture and see how things shift over time and be able to, shift your own thinking to adapt to new information, to be able to consider alternatives, to be able to ask yourself the things that you believe you know to be true. How do you know that? That actually is something that is, again, not only a sign of good mental health, but it helps you to make better decisions, and it helps you to be less stressed in the long run because things stop seeming so all or nothing or black and white. Because our world is really so much more nuanced than that. And then another thing is just the idea of social support. Social support is vital throughout the lifespan. And even if you are a person who doesn't consider themselves to be super social, some people are more introverted than others, and some people need more alone time than others. Some people are better with small groups of close friends. Other people have really big networks of friends. But either way, we are social beings. We are meant to interact with other people, and whether that's virtually in the modern world or whether that is in person, it's really important to have people that you're willing to take the risk of being yourself with. And what I mean by that is not trying to be perfect. That's exhausting and impossible. Not being so protective that we never really share anything of our authentic selves with anybody else, because also then we don't get authenticity from other people to the same degree, right? it takes a willingness to connect with people in an authentic way, and that means sharing of yourself, but it also affords you an opportunity to receive support when you need it, including just feedback. We might have a strong feeling about something, but it's good to kind of get a check on that sometimes. We're not creatures that were meant to be completely, islands unto ourselves. So those are some things that I think can help us all be more resilient in the face of stress. And I guess the final thing I want to say is, even if you're doing every single stress management thing possible, we should include exercise in there. We should include prayer if you're a religious person. Your spiritual life can be very important. It's not important to everybody, but if it's important to you, that's another potential stress management tool. But allowing yourself space to have the feelings you have, so that you don't think that stress management means you're not allowed to react, or that you deny the feelings that you're having. If somebody wrongs you, it's normal and appropriate to be angry, to feel feelings of anger. We get to choose how we act upon those feelings. And again, we can choose more thoughtfully and healthfully if we have better stress management tools in place. But allowing yourself to have feelings that are hard to have, right? Like grief. So many of us have been dealing with that in the last year or so. Anger, frustration, fear. But then again, not clinging to them or drowning in them or being paralyzed by them. And certainly if you're having a hard time sitting with the feelings that you're having, just take your feelings as your truth of the moment. But, seek support as needed. Find somebody near you who can be supportive, some sort of counselor, a licensed professional, where you can feel safe and find a way to better manage those feelings. But for many people, it's going to mean having some uncomfortable times and then using our tools, like breathing through them, getting outside, getting exercise, talking to somebody who you love and whom you trust, and so forth. So those are kind of my thoughts on how to be a person who manages stress well. And you don't need to be a person who's never stressed. That's not possible, and it's not normal. Maybe there's some monk who meditates for 8 hours a day living on a mountaintop, and perhaps they don't feel any sort of stress reactivity, but I think that's almost no one else. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. I'm so glad you joined me. I'm driving in the rain myself, but it seemed like a good time for me to be able to connect with you without lots of dogs barking and people interrupting me and so forth. So that's it. Have a wonderful day and week. I wish you all the very best. If you like the podcast, please like and share and subscribe. If you're interested in any of my guided imagery audio programs on topics like mindfulness, self-compassion, and self-esteem, and to make other types of healthy changes, you can find out more at healthjourneys.com. That's my publisher, where you can find most of my recordings on all of your favorite streaming services. So that's it. Until next time, be well.